Welcome to day 8 of the 21 Days of Prayer podcast with REVO Church. The first week went amazing. We're kicking off week 2 today, and I've got the expert on day 8, a good friend of mine, so I will let her introduce herself.
Well, hi, I'm Grace. I lead worship at the North Campus. It's really fun to serve alongside Matthew every week. So, yeah, that's where I go. That's who I am.
Yeah, we're glad to have Grace there every week. It's a blessing, and mainly because she brings Ezra with her, and that's our favorite. Her son Ezra. He is a bundle of joy and energy, even at like 6:30 in the morning on Sunday when he's watching Disney Plus on the TV.
You get to watch Cars every Sunday. It's
I know,
great.
I love it. It's a fun time. Well, thanks for being here today, Grace. You wrote on loving others. You used Matthew 22. You had a story in Luke. How did you connect all of that to the idea of prayer?
Well, the Good Samaritan was all about, it's a story about a man sacrificially loving a stranger. And so whether it's a friend or a stranger in our lives, I feel like this topic can be connected to prayer because prayer is a very important aspect of our relationships with other people. And so I think it's hard to say that you care for someone or you love someone and you don't lift them up in prayer. That's a huge part of my friendships and my relationships. Like I pray for my friends daily. Whenever they pop into my mind, I just take it as, the Holy Spirit put them on my mind. I'm going to pray for them. But even strangers that I meet, people that I know nothing about, like I've prayed for people that I've seen in a grocery store and things like that, because I believe that prayer is powerful. So
So you're saying that loving others, at least one way to do that is to pray for them.
Definitely.
Yeah. So that's how you're kind of connecting. That's great. I love that. What, as you wrote day 8 and read, story of the Good Samaritan, that's a really popular story. I mean, there are people that have never been in a church that know the story of at least some of the details of the Good Samaritan. I mean, think about the organization Samaritan's Purse that people know about because of their disaster relief and humanitarian aid and stuff like that. And that's all based off of the Good Samaritan. So like, as you're thinking about that, there's a lot to write on. What's one thing that you learned from it as you were writing in day 8?
Well, the way I organized it, I kind of broke it down into like 3 sections, like 3 different ways. The Samaritan was well loved, or the Samaritan is the one that loved the man. But anyway, something that I took away from it that I had never noticed before was how the man actually puts the wounded man that he finds on the side of the road onto his animal, and then he walks him to the inn. And that was a key point that I've never paid attention to before. And I think it's important to note that because loving others requires sacrifice, I think. And so that man had to walk however many miles to bring the wounded man to help. And, he let him take his spot on his own donkey or animal or whatever it was. So I think showing others love requires your own discomfort a lot of times.
And that's interesting because a lot of times we always think about the Good Samaritan being the sacrifice, being the money that he paid, just keep him up at the inn and things like that. And he tells the guy, any charges he accrues, just write it down. And when I come back, I'll pay for it all. But it's also true that it's something that we sacrifice of discomfort and other things or maybe just I'm going to give up my comfort for the sake of somebody else's because I'm going to love them well. So that's a good point. Did you have a key important point? Anything that you were like, hey, as you're reading through this, like, here's the one thing I want people to understand.
Yeah. And this is something I'm still learning, something that I've recently really been learning is that you are not Jesus to people. Like you can show the love of Jesus to people, but you cannot replace Jesus to people.
Right.
Meaning there's going to come a point in every relationship where there's something that they need that you cannot give them. And so something that I thought was really cool about the story of the Good Samaritan is that he pays and he leaves. And he helps the man get care for when he's gone, And so I think that to be a good friend, to love people well, you need to make sure that you are giving them resources to reach out to Jesus, to be able to have him who will never be taken from them, so that when you don't have the strength or you don't have the energy or you are not in their life anymore, they'll have resources that will help them for the rest of their lives. So
wow, that's wise. That's good. That's good. I'm glad I asked about the key important point, because that's something that I know I struggle with sometimes. Is when I help, I want to help and do everything.
I know,
and
me
realize
too.
that it's okay to just drop the guy off at the end, pay for him, and leave. Like the guy
Yeah.
didn't stick around and do everything else.
It doesn't mean you don't love them. In fact,
Yeah.
it kind of means that you love them a lot, because
Right.
you're giving them like the lasting resource. So.
Yeah, and it certainly glorifies God, because you're realizing that God's God and I'm not, and I can't do everything that he can do, and you just trust him. And so as we get to the end of day 8, kicking off week 2, what's the next step, application point you've got for those that were reading day 8 and listen to the podcast that we can challenge everybody with?
Well, something that I've when you hear spiritual discipline, you're like, oh, you have to like sit at your kitchen table and spend hours on, the spiritual discipline. For me, a spiritual discipline is just, what does it look like in your everyday life to apply something in like every single moment with every single breath? There's a verse that says pray without ceasing. And so one thing that I do, and this is how I pray for my friends while I have a toddler and I have a busy day and stuff, is when somebody pops into my mind, I instantly pray out loud for them. And so for you mamas or you parents, this is also good, because then your kids hear you praying for your friends. So my one tip would be, when somebody pops into your head, instantly say a prayer for them, whatever is on your heart, and then send them a text message and say, hey, praying for you.
Yeah.
Or, hey, how's your day going? So
boom, just pause it right now.
Yeah.
Somebody popped in your head, just pause the video, or heck, X out of the video. It doesn't matter. Prayer is more important than that. So do it. Just start praying for somebody right now. And I love the point too, that it even will allow other people to hear you pray, like your kids who are in the house with you. And at the very least, just know, hey, my mom's praying, or my dad's somebody that loves other people and loves them so much he's willing to pray for them. So there you go. That's a next step, application point for you today, is when somebody pops in your head, don't just pray for them, but pray for them out loud. Stop right then, right there, what you're doing, to pray out loud for them, and see what God might do when you send them the text and say that you were just praying for them. Thanks, Grace, for being here. Appreciate you giving up some of the precious time that I know is so valuable to you. I know you're super busy with a little boy, but we appreciate you being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Hope that you guys enjoyed reading day 8 that Grace wrote, and that these 21 Days of Prayer podcast and the devotionals, all of that is being used by God to spark a revolution of life change in your heart and in your life through these 21 days of prayer.